Welcome back to the daily Rambam class. We are up to chapter 11 of the laws of Para Aduma. It is Thursday after all. We'll start with a brief recap or a quick look at where we are up to in the Rambam. Bear with me one moment, please. We are in the 11th volume. No, we're in the 10th volume. Excuse me. Sefer Torah, 8 topics. Which are Tumas Meis, impurity of the dead, the Para Aduma, Tzara'as, Mishka Vavashav, Shar Avas Tumas, which we'll get to, all other types of impurity, impurity with foods, with vessels, and finally the laws of mikveh. Well, right now we're learning Para Aduma. Para Aduma has 15 chapters. We're close to the end. We are today learning about the water, the sprinkling of the water. It's chapter 11. Let's take a look at chapter 11 of Para Aduma. How is a person who is impure because of contact with the human corpse purified by the water of sprinkling? A person who is pure takes 3 stalks of hyssop and binds them with 1 bond. Each stalk should have at least 1 bud. He should dip the top of the buds in the sprinkling water while it is in a container. Concentrate and sprinkle it on the person, the impure person, the Tameh person, or the Tameh utensil on the 3rd day and the 7th day of his 7-day count. When should this be done? After sunrise. If I'd sprinkled after dawn, so the sun hadn't yet risen but it had already gotten light, it is acceptable. Once the water has been sprinkled on a person on the 7th day, he should immerse in a mikveh during the day, wait until nightfall, and then in the evening he would become pure and he would be allowed to partake of the sacrificial meat and enter into the Beis HaMikdash. If one dipped the hyssop in the water at night and sprinkled it during the day, or he dipped it in the water during the day and sprinkled it at night, the sprinkling is invalid. Moreover, the water imparts impurity just as the water of the ashes of the red heifer does, as will be explained. So not only won't it make him pure, it could actually make him impure, which is why the laws of Para Aduma, the red heifer, I'm sure you've heard from the other rabbis, is an example of that mitzvah that's completely incomprehensible. The sprinkling is not valid unless the hyssop is dipped in the water and it is sprinkled from it on the 3rd and 7th day after sunrise. If one transgressed and performed these activities after dawn, it is acceptable as we just mentioned. If a person became impure due to contact with the corpse, and several days passed before he began his 7-day counts without having the water sprinkled upon him. So let's say he became impure, he helped arrange, he helped bury somebody on Sunday, and now it is the end of the week. It's already Thursday and he hasn't done anything about it. So when he comes to have the water sprinkled upon him, he should count 3 days in our presence. So we don't say, okay, well, you're already 5 days down the line. We say, no, you obviously haven't been counting, so start counting from now. Well, we're not going to start on the Thursday, as we'll see. The water is sprinkled upon him on the 3rd and 7th day. He immerses in a mikvah on the 7th day and waits until nightfall to become pure, as he needs 3 things: the sprinkling, he needs mikvah, and he needs nightfall. To whom does the Rambam apply? To a common person who comes to have the water sprinkled upon him. Even if he says that this is the 3rd day after he contracted impurity, so actually if he says that it's actually the impurity was on Sunday and now it's Wednesday, his word is not accepted, for perhaps he became impure today. Therefore, he must count the days in our presence. So we want to check in from day 1. If by contrast a chaver is somebody who's known to know the laws and keep the laws, comes to have the water sprinkled upon him, it may be sprinkled on him as he implements immediately. So if somebody who we know knows the laws and keeps the laws comes to us and says that today is day 3, we trust him and we sprinkle him up. When such water was sprinkled on a person on the 3rd day, but it wasn't sprinkled on him on the 7th day. So what happens if he missed day 7? Does he need to restart? No. So he can immerse in a mikveh whenever he desires after the 7th day, whether during the night or during the day. And the water should be sprinkled upon him during the day, whether before immersion or after immersion. So if he forgot to sprinkle for day number 7, so then he could, the sprinkling has to be done by day. Mikveh can be done by night as well. So we can actually, or either way, you can actually first go after mikveh and get sprinkled afterwards. Even if he immersed on the night of the 9th day or the 9th of the 10th day, the water may be sprinkled on him on the following day after sunrise. So although it's after day 7, it still needs to be done during the day. But the order does not matter. It is acceptable for all of those who are impure to have this water sprinkled upon them. What is implied? The water may be sprinkled on zavin, one type of impurity, a man that has an emission, a specific emission related to a disease, consecutive emissions one day after the next. We'll learn about that. Zavais, which is when a woman has blood not as a result of a menstrual period, or a woman in the nidra state, or a woman impure because of childbirth, on the 3rd and 7th day after they contract the ritual impurity connected with the human corpse. So these are all different examples, forms of impurity, which all can have the water sprinkled upon them. Okay, so let me be more clear. These other people don't need the water sprinkled upon them. The only person that needs to have the water sprinkled upon them is somebody who was in contact with the dead. But the question is, what happens if he's impure on 2 accounts? He's impure both because he came in contact with the dead and because he's a zav. So now a zav impurity is actually more severe than being in contact with the dead. So the question is, while he is a zav, will he be able to have the water sprinkled on him? Because right now he's got bigger issues to deal with, so to speak. And the answer is yes. One doesn't conflict the other. That's what the Rambam was just teaching us. After the sprinkling, they are purified from that impurity, although they are still impure because of another type of impurity. As the Torah says, and the pure person shall sprinkle on the impure, implying even though he is impure on another account, he's still remaining impure for another reason, we could still help him with getting rid of this form of impurity. Similarly, a person who is uncircumcised, the Torah also refers to an uncircumcised person as an impure person, a Jew, may have this water sprinkled upon him. What is implied? If an uncircumcised person contracted the impurity connected with the corpse and had the water sprinkled upon him on the 3rd and 7th day, he is pure from this impurity. The moment he is circumcised, he will go to mikveh, and he will then be able to eat from sacrificial meat, which he wouldn't be allowed to eat in an uncircumcised state. The optimum way of fulfilling the mitzvah of the hyssop is to use 3 stalks, each stalk having 1 bud. If at first there were 3 buds and then only 2 remained, or if one took 2 at first and bound them together, it is acceptable. So you should have 3, but if you left with 2, that's fine. Should the buds open and the leaves fall off, even if only the slightest portion of each remain, it is acceptable, because as long as the smallest amount remains from a hyssop, it is acceptable. So this was, so far we described it to be 3 separate stalks, each stalk with 1 bud. And if one of those 3 buds is lost, it's still fine. And of each bud, if most of it was lost and only a little part of it remained, it's also fine. As long as just a little bit of that bud is there, then that works. I'm seeing if I have a picture over here. I don't see a picture. Maybe a diagram. No decent diagram. But so far, just imagine you've got 3 twigs, and on each twig, you've got at least 1 bud. That's how it should be done. If you're down to just 2 twigs, it's fine. If those buds have almost entirely disintegrated, but a little bit is left, that's fine. But now if you don't have 3 stalks, you have 1 stalk, but that 1 stalk has on it 3 buds. One should separate one from the other and afterwards bind them together for the mitzvahs for them to be bound. So you want it to be separate stalks that are bound together, even though this is not explicitly stated in the Torah. It's still part of the oral tradition. If one separated them but did not bind them, or bound them without separating them, or used them for sprinkling without separating them or binding them, it is still valid. Even if your 3 stalks are still connected at the bottom, after the fact, we will allow it, although at the outset they should be separated. If it's short, if the hyssop is short, and one should bind it, then what should you do? You could bind it with a string on a weaving needle or the like, and dip it into the water, lift it up, and then hold the hyssop in one's hand and sprinkle with it. So when you sprinkle, all you want is the hyssop. But in order to get it into the water, if it's really small, you could use a splinter. If you did not do so, but instead sprinkled it with it while bound to the needle, and he wasn't sure whether he sprinkled from the string, from the needle, or from the bud, then the sprinkling is invalid. You need to be sure that the water comes from the bud. I must say that I'm sure there's some explanation on a deeper level what all of this represents. I would love to learn more about that. Unfortunately, today my time is more limited, but I certainly am glad that I have this opportunity to learn Rambam with you. One should not sprinkle with underdeveloped stalks of hyssop, nor with the seed pods, but with stalks. This is what is meant by the underdeveloped stalks which have not reached maturity. What does that mean? I'm not sure. Nevertheless, if the water of the ashes of the red heifer was sprinkled on a person with an underdeveloped hyssop, and that person entered the temple, he would not be liable for entering it in a state of impurity. At which point should a hyssop be used for sprinkling? From the time it buds. When a hyssop has been used for the sprinkling of this water, it may also be used to purify a person afflicted with tzara'as. Whenever a hyssop is described by an additional term, it's not acceptable. So when you speak about an azov, it needs to be a specific species, a hyssop. The hyssop that is called a hyssop alone is the one which is acceptable. It is the hyssop that is eaten domestically. The species which are called Greek hyssop, red hyssop, dessert hyssop, or Roman hyssop are invalid. So this is an example of when we need to have a tradition passed down. Just like when it comes to an etrog, you can't go to the market and ask them for a citron fruit and use it for your lulav, because we need to be sure that it's the exact species the Torah speaks about, which is why an etrog is imported from Italy, Calabria, or from specific farms that the tradition has been passed down that they are the actual etrog. A hyssop that was worshipped as an asheros, if a person actually bowed down to that tree, or it came from a city that was led astray, the people of the city were all together served an idol or served false deity, or it belonged to a false deity, or it came from impure truma, then it's invalid. If it comes from pure truma, as an initial preference, one should not sprinkle with it. If one did, the sprinkling is acceptable if the truma is still pure. When a hyssop was gathered to be used for kindling, so to be used for kindling, you planned on using it to fuel your fireplace, and liquids fell upon it, one may dry it and it will remain acceptable for sprinkling. If it was reaped for use as food, even if the water that fell on it was dried, it's unacceptable. Why? Because once it was reaped for food and it had water on it, it's considered as impure for sprinkling. Why? All liquids, foods, and implements are considered as impure with regards to the purification process using the water or the ashes of the red heifer, as will be explained. So once a food has water on it, it's susceptible to impurity, which disqualifies it from being used to sprinkle the waters. If a hyssop was reaped to use for the purification process, it is as if it was reaped for kindling, so that's fine. Thus, if a liquid fell on it, he can dry it and it can be used for sprinkling. We don't say that it is now disqualified. Test your knowledge. What is the process of sprinkling?
Sorry,
yes.
Saban, just before we
yes.
do, can you just explain how you count days? So I buried somebody this morning, let's say. Is today day one? Or do we start counting like, yeah, maybe from tomorrow is day one, right? I'm not quite sure how the counting works.
Okay, good. I thought maybe it had been addressed in a previous chapter. My personal study of Rambam is 3 chapters a day. So it's been quite an interesting experience for me to learn every 8th chapter now in this particular series of classes. And it's quite amazing how the Rambam, even though it's a continuum, each chapter is quite standalone, which I've discovered now. I've never learned Rambam just individual chapters. I've always learned it in order. Let's see what he says in my commentary. If we have an answer, good. Otherwise, we'll have to get back to you.
Yeah, for example, on Pesach, you're counting the Omer, it's the day after this first day. Various others, different countings. I would assume.
I have an answer for you.
Oh, good. Yeah.
The day that the person became pure does count as day number 1.
Thank you. That's got exactly what I wanted. Thank you so much.
Okay. Yes. And now let's test your knowledge. What is the process of sprinkling the water on one who is impure? One dips 3 stalks of hyssop into the water and then sprinkles the water on him on the 3rd and 7th day before nightfall. One dips 3 bunches of hyssop into the water and sprinkles the water on him on the 3rd and 7th day before nightfall. Or one dips 3 stalks of hyssop into the water and then sprinkles the water on him on the 3rd and 7th day after sunrise.
I think option 3, the one that refers to after sunrise.
Yeah, 3.
Okay. I was thinking before night. I was thinking I guess it's between sunrise and nightfall.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know. Isn't after sunrise also before nightfall?
Yes.
Yes.
I guess maybe if we said before nightfall, it means you need to wait maybe until night, I don't know. Either way, we could take it up with the editors. If one had the water sprinkled on him on the 3rd day, but he missed the 7th day, what should be done? He may have the water sprinkled on him on any of the following days, but he may not immerse himself before then. He may have the water sprinkled on him on any of the following days, and he may immerse himself before then. Or he starts his count again, and he is sprinkled upon the 3rd and 7th day of his new count.
Number 2.
2.
I agree.
Question number 3. When a Zava contracts impurity from a corpse, may she have the water sprinkled on her while she is still in her current state? No, she must wait until she is no longer a Zava, or yes, she may have the water sprinkled on her while she is still a Zava.
Number 2.
Correct.
Yes. So she may have the water sprinkled. Yep.
Number 4. If one separated 3 buds from a stalk and dipped them in the water without binding them together, is the sprinkling that follows still valid?
Yes.
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 I agree. Yes.
Okay.